The first crystal spire fell during what the Vexari called the Resonance Festival. Thousands had gathered in the Valley of Echoes, their crystalline bodies gleaming in the triple moonlight as they hummed in perfect harmony. The planetary vibration was a tradition spanning millennia, a celebration of life and continuity. No one noticed the hairline fracture spreading through the central spire until it was too late. Ithax, a young crystal composer, was the first to sense the wrongness, a dissonance in the planet's core resonance that sent panic through his lattice structure. He tried to warn the celebrants, but the massive crack that split the night sky drowned his warning. The central spire, standing for 50,000 years, shattered into 1,000,000 glittering shards. 3,000 Vexari died instantly, their consciousness extinguished as their crystal matrices fragmented beyond repair. The planet sings its death song, Elder Vexa announced to the Resonance Council the next day, her faceted surface dim with grief. The core destabilization has begun. The models give us perhaps 2 orbital cycles before total crystalline collapse. The Vexari had known this might come. Their scientists had documented the increasing instability for generations. Their world was old, ancient by biological standards, and the crystal matrices that formed both their planet and their bodies had begun a metamorphosis that would ultimately shatter everything. "We must send the call," Ithax proposed, his youthful matrix still bright with hope despite the tragedy he'd witnessed. "Other civilizations exist among the stars. The visitors who studied us decades ago. They must have technology that could help." Elder Vex's crystalline form dimmed further. "Those visitors documented our condition and departed, Ithax. They showed no interest in intervention." "Then we must reach farther," insisted Ithax. "Our telepathic resonance can extend beyond our system if we all join together." The debate lasted 7 rotations, precious time ticking away as more spires fell across the crystalline world. Finally, in desperation, the council agreed. What did they have to lose? On the 8th day, 5,000,000 Vexari unified their consciousness in the Great Resonance, something not attempted since the War of Fractures millennia ago. Their combined telepathic cry rippled across space, carrying not just data but emotion. Fear, hope, the desperate desire to continue existing. "Help us," they sang into the cosmic void. "Our world is dying." Across the galactic arm, on 17 worlds of the Galactic Concord, sensitive instruments detected the signal. 17 species received the Vexari's desperate plea. In the Grand Conclave on Nexus Prime, representatives gathered in emergency session. Ambassador Jevtil of the Mechanical Zith Collective processed the signal through multiple analytical frameworks. "The crystallization process is natural and inevitable," Jevtil declared, metal appendages clicking decisively. "Intervention would require 31.7% of our combined terraforming resources for uncertain results. The cost-benefit analysis does not support action." The ethereal Morvani representative, floating above his gravity plate, chimed in. "We documented the Vexari civilization fully during our anthropological survey 20 cycles ago. Their cultural and scientific contributions have been archived. Their evolutionary conclusion, while unfortunate, does not justify disruptive intervention." One by one, the representatives spoke, each finding reason to ignore the cry that had traveled across hundreds of light years. Resource allocations, natural processes, non-interference directives, technological incompatibilities. Until Admiral Chen, the human representative, rose from his seat. His species was the newest addition to the Concord, their inclusion still controversial among the established powers. "Have any of you actually felt what they're sending?" he demanded, face flushed with emotion that most Concord species had evolved beyond. He pounded his fist on the crystalline table, sending ripples through the sensitive surface. "They're not asking for scientific analysis. They're begging for help." The chamber fell silent, 17 species regarding the human with reactions ranging from pity to disgust. "The matter will be put to vote," announced the arbiter. The result, 16 to 1 for non-interference. As the human delegation departed the chamber, A junior diplomat named Elena Reyes caught up with her captain. "Sir," she whispered, eyes bright with the same intensity Chen had displayed. "What if we went anyway?" Captain's log, UNSC Mercy, Elena Reyes commanding. "We have altered course for the Vexari system against direct Concord instructions. I take full responsibility for this decision." Elena paused the recording, watching her crew work with quiet efficiency on the bridge. No one had objected when she announced their new heading 6 hours ago. No one had invoked their right to be relieved of duty for a mission gone rogue. Their silence spoke volumes. Resume log. "The crew has unanimously supported this intervention. I have noted this in their service records to mitigate potential consequences upon our return. If they returned." The thought remained unspoken. "Approaching FTL transition point, Captain," announced Navigator Ortiz, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Elena nodded. "Take us in." The Mercy, a diplomatic vessel never designed for unsanctioned rescue missions, shuddered as its engines pushed beyond recommended parameters. The viewport flared with exotic particles as the ship punched through into hyperspace, leaving behind the safety of Concord territory. "Transmission coming in from Earth, Captain," Communications Officer Park said, his expression grim. "Priority Alpha." "It's Admiral Chen." Elena took a deep breath. On screen, Admiral Chen's face appeared, the bags under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept since the Concord vote. His official uniform was rumpled, his expression a mixture of pride and fear. "Captain Reyes, I'm officially ordering you to return to Earth immediately." Elena straightened in her chair. "With respect, sir, I cannot comply with that order." "I know." Chen's facade cracked, a small smile breaking through. "Now that's on record, and I've done my duty." "Unofficially, Elena, the situation is deteriorating rapidly." The screen split to show footage from the United Earth Assembly. Concord Ambassador Tillerin, a towering Morvani, addressed the human representatives with cold fury. "Your rogue vessel's actions constitute a direct violation of Concord protocols." The ethereal being pronounced. "Should the UNSC Mercy proceed to Vexari space, the Concord will have no choice but to suspend all technology sharing agreements, colony expansion permissions, and preferential trade status. Humanity's probationary membership will be reconsidered." Elena felt her stomach tighten. Humanity had fought hard for that membership, seeing it as essential for their species' security and advancement. 20 years of diplomatic work undone by her single decision. "How bad is it really, sir?" she asked when the footage ended. Chen sighed. "The corporations are screaming about lost profits. The military is concerned about vulnerability without Concord protection. But the public—" He paused, his expression softening. "The public is with you, Elena." The screen changed again to show massive gatherings in cities across Earth. People holding signs. "Answer the KL. Merci for the VEXARI. Humanity stands with life." The president's approval rating jumped 15 points after this statement, Chen said. The footage showed President Okafor addressing the world, her voice steady and resolute. "We would rather be poor members of a compassionate galactic community than wealthy members of a heartless one." Elena felt something catch in her throat. That won't matter much when sanctions hit. Maybe, maybe not. Chen leaned closer to the camera. "Listen, I don't have long before this transmission is logged. We've managed to send you everything we have on the Vexari. Biological data, cultural assessments, planetary scans from the previous Concord expeditions. It's not much, but it might help." "Thank you, sir." Chen's expression grew serious. "The Concord has dispatched enforcement vessels, Elena. They won't fire on you. That would be too extreme even for them. But they will attempt to intercept. You have perhaps a 5-day lead." Elena nodded. "Understood. One more thing," Chen added, his voice dropping. "The Vexari distress signal. It's changed since you altered course. Our telepathic translators detect surprise. And hope. They know someone's coming, Elena." As the transmission ended, Alina stood and moved to the viewport, watching the streaking lights of hyperspace. 5 days to reach a dying world. 5 days to figure out how to save a crystalline species they knew almost nothing about. Dr. Patel to the bridge. She called through the ship's comm. It's time to prepare for first contact. Behind her, the crew of the Mercy continued their work, each carrying the weight of a decision that might save one civilization while jeopardizing their own. The Mercy dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder, its systems straining after the 5-day journey at maximum velocity. The view screen automatically dimmed as an impossible world filled their vision. "My God," breathed Lieutenant Park. "It's beautiful." Beautiful barely scratched the surface. The Vexari homeworld gleamed like a massive jewel against the blackness of space, a sphere of blue-white crystal that fractured the local star's light into prismatic beams that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Cities rose in crystalline spires that seemed to defy physics, connected by bridges that appeared as delicate as spider silk, yet must have been incredibly strong. But the beauty couldn't hide the tragedy unfolding. Massive fissures scared the surface, some large enough to be visible from orbit. As they watched, a distant section of the planet's surface collapsed inward, sending a plume of glittering dust into the atmosphere. "Life signs?" Captain Rise asked, her voice hushed. Science Officer Nakamura consulted her readings. "Difficult to determine, Captain. The crystalline composition interferes with our standard bioscanners. But there are enormous energy patterns consistent with organized civilization across approximately 60% of the surface." Dr. Sanjay Patel stumbled onto the bridge, his face pale, hands pressed against his temples. As the ship's xenolinguist, he'd been given experimental telepathic enhancers to prepare for contact with the Vexari. "They know we're here," he gasped. "Millions of them, all reaching out at once." Reyes moved quickly to steady him. "What are they saying?" "Not saying. Feeling." Patel's eyes were unfocused. Surprise. Disbelief. Hope so fragile it hurts. And, he winced, they're trying to understand why we came when others wouldn't. Others? Reyes exchanged glances with her first officer. "You mean the Concord expeditions?" Patel nodded weakly. 3 different species. Studied them, took samples, left. Security Chief Camara spoke up from her station. "Captain, I've been reviewing the classified files Admiral Chen sent us. There's something here you need to see." The main screen shifted to display a Concord resource analysis, marked Confidential, Alpha Clearance. Reyes read aloud, her voice growing colder with each word. "Crystallization process will yield approximately 4.3 million metric tons of refined Ethereum. Essential component for next-generation FTL drives. Harvesting post-extinction more cost-effective than intervention. Recommend monitoring until process completes." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. "They left them to die because it was profitable," Camara said, the words hanging in the air like an accusation. Reyes turned to Dr. Patel. "Can you communicate with them? Tell them we're here to help." Patel shook his head. "Their telepathy is too alien. I'm receiving impressions, but can't send coherently. We need—" He stopped suddenly, staring at the view screen. "The windows." "What?" "The quantum glass in our viewports." Patel moved toward the screen, placing his palm against it. "It resonates with their communication patterns. Look." The viewport material had begun to shimmer with delicate patterns of light, ripples of color flowing outward from where Paddle's hand touched the surface. "It's responding to them," he whispered. "They communicate through crystalline resonance patterns." For the next hour, the crew worked frantically to modify the ship's external hull emitters to project light patterns based on linguistic algorithms. Patel, despite the pain of the telepathic overflow, directed the efforts, interpreting the increasingly complex patterns sent from the planet's surface. Finally, the Universal Translator produced its first coherent interpretation of Vexari communication. A pattern of blue-white light cascaded across the view screen, resolving into words that struck every human present to their core. Why did you come when no others would? Captain Reyes stepped forward, her reflection rippling in the crystalline display. When she spoke, her words were transmitted as patterns of light that spread across the viewport. Because that's what humans do, she said simply. We answer when someone calls for help. She didn't need Paidel's translation to understand the response, a wave of emotion so powerful it brought tears to every human eye on the bridge. For the first time in their long history, the Vexari experienced something they had no word for in their language. Captain Reyes sat in the conference room turned makeshift communication center, surrounded by hastily installed light projectors. Across from her, a delegation of Vexari representatives hovered in suspension fields, their crystalline bodies too dense and sharp-edged to risk contact with the ship's surfaces. The lead Vexari, introduced as Elder Vexa, resembled a complex geometric sculpture of blue-white crystal. Light patterns rippled across her faceted surface as she communicated. Your presence honors us, the translator rendered her message, but we must ask what help you can offer. Our world has perhaps 20 days before catastrophic failure. Reyes felt the weight of the question. The Mercy was a diplomatic vessel with limited capabilities. They had no evacuation capacity for billions of crystal beings, no technology to halt a planetary collapse. Elder Vexa, we came because no one should face extinction alone. Reyes began carefully. But I must be honest, we don't have immediate solutions. Our ship lacks the resources to evacuate your population. The light patterns from the Vexari dimmed noticeably, a visual representation of their collective disappointment that required no translation. Then why come at all? Asked another Vexari, identified as Ithax, his crystalline form smaller and with sharper angles than the elders. To witness our end. Dr. Patel, monitoring the telepathic impressions, winced. They're experiencing what humans would call despair, he whispered to Reyes. Before Reyes could respond, the conference room door burst open. Lieutenant Commander Zhang stumbled in, his uniform rumpled from days without sleep, eyes bloodshot, but blazing with excitement. Captain, he exclaimed, oblivious to the diplomatic meeting in progress. I've figured it out. Reyes rose halfway from her chair. Commander, this isn't the experimental terraforming arrays. Zhang continued, undeterred. We can reverse engineer them to stabilize the crystal matrices. A sudden ripple of light passed between the Vexari delegates. Explain, Elder Vexa demanded, her patterns intensifying. Zhang activated a holographic display, showing schematics of devices mounted to the Mercy's hull. These were designed to modify planetary conditions for colony preparation, but the principle is adaptable. If we reconfigure them to emit specific resonance frequencies that counter the destabilization, like using sound to counter sound. Ithax interrupted, his crystalline form vibrating slightly, creating interference patterns to neutralize the destructive resonance. Zhang blinked in surprise at the quick understanding. Exactly. It wouldn't be permanent, but it could buy time. How much time? Asked Elder Vexa. Months, maybe a year, Zhang admitted. It would require placing stabilization nodes at key points throughout your planet's crystal structure. The hard part is that someone would need to manually calibrate each node to the local resonance pattern, and this calibration requires. Vexa pressed. Zhang hesitated, glancing at Reyes. Direct neural interfaces between humans and the crystalline technology. We'd need volunteers willing to temporarily link their minds with your planet's matrix. A silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. The process would be painful for your kind, stated Ithax, not as a question but as a fact detected through his species' innate telepathic awareness. Yes, Zhang acknowledged. Possibly dangerous too. But it might work. Elder Vex's crystalline form rotated slowly, refracting light across the room. You would risk your fragile bodies and minds to save those you never knew existed until days ago. Captain Reyes stood, addressing all present. That's what we're offering. Not a guarantee, but a chance, and our commitment to stand with you regardless of the outcome. As these words were translated into light patterns, the Vexari delegates began to resonate in unison, creating harmonics that caused the viewports to vibrate subtly. "What is happening?" Rais asked Dr. Patel quietly. "I believe," he said, voice filled with wonder, "this is their equivalent of applause." The moment was interrupted by Lieutenant Park's urgent voice over the comm. "Captain, priority message from Earth. The Concord has authorized military intervention against us, and," he paused, "we're picking up approaching warp signatures. Multiple vessels." Rais turned back to the Vexari delegation, determination hardening her features. "It seems we need to work quickly." Elder Vex's response needed no translation. "Then let us begin." Neural interface active in 3, 2, 1. Lieutenant Kira Chen screamed as her consciousness expanded beyond her body, merging with the crystalline structure surrounding her. Colors she had no names for flooded her perception. Mathematical patterns that had no equivalent in human thought cascaded through her mind. It was beautiful, terrifying, and overwhelming. "Lieutenant, focus on the resonance pattern." Zhang's voice came through her comms, anchoring her to reality. "Find the harmonics." Kira forced her mind to concentrate despite the sensory overload. She was suspended in a stabilization harness 50 meters deep in a crystal ravine, the first of 12 human volunteers deploying resonance nodes at key fracture points across the Vexari world. I see it," she gasped. "The destabilization is like a wave, building from below." Her fingers, guided more by the neural interface than conscious thought, adjusted the terraforming array. The device hummed to life, emitting counter-frequencies that rippled through the surrounding crystal. "Resonance Node 1 is online," she reported, blood trickling from her nose as the neural feedback intensified. "Local stabilization at 73% and climbing." Similar scenes played out across the planet's surface as human technicians descended into fracture zones, their minds partially merged with alien crystal consciousness. Each stabilization required a human to experience the crystalline awareness directly, a process as beautiful as it was agonizing. In the Mercy's command center, now relocated to a Vexari control spire, Captain Rais monitored each team's progress. Beside her, Elder Vexa watched the light patterns representing the planet's stability with the Vexari equivalent of concern. "Your people suffer greatly for this intervention," Vexa observed as another technician reported neural strain symptoms. Rais nodded grimly. "They volunteered knowing the risks. We did not think organic minds could interface with crystalline consciousness," said Ithax, who had become their primary liaison. "Your species continues to surprise us." Before Rais could respond, an alarm sounded. One of the deployment teams had gone silent. "Crystal collapse in Sector 7, reported Commander Zhang, studying the holographic display. "Lieutenant Dawson's team is trapped, along with approximately 30 Vexari." "Can we reach them?" Rais demanded. "The passage is blocked by crystal debris. We'd need specialized equipment we don't have." A ripple of light passed through Ithax's form. "I can help. Our bodies can phase through similar crystal structures. But you'd risk crystalline resonance disruption," Zhang protested, understanding the danger to the Vexari through his own neural interface experiences. "As you risk your fragile bodies for us," Ithax countered. "Is that not the exchange we have begun?" Minutes later, a joint human Vexari rescue operation was underway. Vexari guides led human rescue teams through crystalline passages, using their ability to temporarily alter their own molecular structure to create openings where needed. Humans provided portable stasis fields to transport injured Vexari, whose structures had been compromised. In the collapsed sector, Lieutenant Dawson lay semi-conscious, her neural interface smoking from overload. Around her, several Vexari had formed a protective arrangement, using their bodies to shield her from falling crystal shards. As the rescue team reached them, one of the Vexari explained through light patterns, "She saved us by redirecting the resonance cascade. We could not allow harm to come to her after such sacrifice." Working in perfect coordination despite their biological differences, humans and Vexari extracted all survivors. In the medical bay, Dr. Patel observed something remarkable as he treated the injured humans. "Captain," he reported to Reyes, "the neural interfaces are creating lasting changes in brain activity. Our people are developing an intuitive understanding of crystalline communication, and the Vexari who worked closely with us are showing signs of comprehending human emotional states." Reyes was about to respond when Lieutenant Park's voice came through the comm with unmistakable urgency. "Captain, the Concord vessels have arrived. 3 enforcement cruisers and a diplomatic flagship. They're demanding immediate withdrawal of all human personnel." On the main viewer, the sleek, imposing silhouettes of Concord ships moved into orbit around the glittering world. Elder Vex's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "You have helped us begin stabilization, but your people face consequences for this mercy." Rey straightened her uniform, determination in every line of her body. "The stabilization will continue. If I have to face the Concord alone to buy time, so be it." "Not alone," said Ithax, moving to stand beside her. "We will face them together." The Concord diplomatic chamber was a study in intimidation. Designed to adjust automatically to the environmental needs of any species, it had reconfigured itself into a towering amphitheater with the human delegation positioned at the lowest point. Captain Rice stood alone on the central platform, surrounded by representatives from the 3 Concord enforcement vessels. Ambassador Tilarin of the Morvani hovered above his gravity plate, his ethereal form pulsing with barely contained anger. "Captain Elena Reyes, you stand in violation of Concord Directive 37B, the Non-Interference Protocol. You were explicitly ordered to avoid contact with the Vexari civilization." "I received those orders," Reyes acknowledged, her voice steady despite the pressure. "I chose to disregard them." A murmur passed through the assembled officials. Such blunt admission was rare in Concord proceedings. "You admit to willful violation of Concord law," demanded the Zith representative, metal appendages clicking in agitation. "I do," Rice said, "and I would do it again." The Vexari called for help. We answered. Ambassador Tilarin's form darkened. "Your species' emotional reasoning is precisely why the admission of humanity to the Concord remains controversial. The natural evolutionary conclusion of the Vexari was profitable for you." Rice interrupted. The room fell silent. "Our intelligence officers found the resource projections. The crystallization process creates Hephyrium, essential for your next-generation drives. You didn't save them because dead Vexari were more valuable than living ones." The accusation hung in the air like a physical thing. "The resource analysis was merely one factor," began the Zith representative. "Save it," Rice cut in. "I'm not here to debate your motives. I'm here to inform you that we've begun stabilization procedures on the Vexari world. We have 11 resonance nodes deployed, with the final one being installed now. The immediate crisis will be averted within hours." The Morveni ambassador's form rippled with displeasure. "Your primitive technology cannot sustain long-term stabilization. You have merely delayed the inevitable while risking sanctions against your entire species." "You're right about one thing," Rice admitted. "The stabilization is temporary. But that brings me to my proposal." She activated a holographic projector, displaying an uninhabited moon in the Ta Ceti system, human territory. This moon has a silicate core, with trace elements matching the Vexari homeworld's original composition. We propose to transform it into a new home for the Vexari people. The chamber erupted in protests. Planetary engineering on that scale is forbidden without full Concord approval. The resource allocation would be astronomical. The violation of natural evolutionary progression. Reyes waited for the outcry to subside. The alternative is extinction of a sentient species that has done nothing to deserve such a fate. Is that the legacy the Concord wishes to establish? That profit margins outweigh the value of life. A new voice cut through the tension. "The human speaks wisdom we have long forgotten. All eyes turned to the entrance where an unexpected delegation had arrived. The Elshuri, one of the oldest species in the Concord, rarely participated in such proceedings. Their crystalline organic hybrid forms glimmered as they entered the chamber. Elder Vorish, Ambassador Tillarin acknowledged, his tone shifting to one of respect. The Elshuri honor us with their presence, but this matter concerns us deeply, the Elshuri elder interrupted. Before our current form, the Elshuri faced extinction. Our crystalline evolution nearly destroyed us, as it now threatens the Vexari. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. We survived because another species intervened, Vorish continued. They are long gone now, but their compassion allowed us to exist today. We have since stood by while others perished, following Concord protocols of non-interference. No more. The elder turned to Captain Reyes. The Elshuri will support the human proposal. We will provide our crystal-forming technology to assist in creating a new home for the Vexari. The Concord officials erupted in heated debate, but Reyes knew the tide had turned. The Elshuri's support carried immense weight. As she was escorted from the chamber while deliberations continued, Reyes found Ithax waiting outside, his crystalline form vibrating with what she now recognized as anxiety. They will never agree, he said. The profit motive is too strong. Reyes allowed herself a small smile. They don't need to agree. We just needed time. While we've been talking, Ambassador Chen has been releasing all evidence of the Concord's profit calculations to every civilized world. Sometimes, the court of public opinion is more powerful than any official sanction. Ithax's form brightened. You created a third option where only two existed before. Neither surrender nor defeat, but transformation of the field itself. That, said Reyes, is a very human approach to impossible problems. 3 months after the confrontation with the Concord, the project humanity had dubbed Operation Crystal Cradle was well underway. The Ta Ceti moon, once a barren silicate sphere, now bristled with massive crystalline formations that grew daily under the guidance of joint human Vexari Elshuri teams. Lieutenant Kira Chen stood on an observation platform, watching a new crystal spire emerge from the surface below. The sight still took her breath away. Translucent structures that seemed too delicate to exist, yet were stronger than any human-made material. Beautiful, isn't it? Asked Zhang, joining her at the railing. Like all the human technicians who had used the neural interfaces, he now wore a small crystal implant at his temple, facilitating direct communication with their Vexari counterparts. It's like watching a planet dream itself into existence, Kira said. Her neural implant pulsed gently as she expressed the sentiment, sending ripples of appreciation to the Vexari working below. What neither of them had expected during those first painful neural linkages was how the connection would evolve. The interfaces, originally designed for temporary use, had created lasting changes in human neural pathways. Those who had volunteered now perceived crystalline resonance patterns directly, understanding the mathematical beauty of crystal growth as emotion rather than calculation. In turn, the Vexari who worked most closely with humans had developed new crystalline formations that allowed them to process and interpret human emotional states. The cultural exchange had become biological. Ithax is ready for the demonstration, Zhang said. Captain Reyes wants us there. They made their way to the central testing chamber where a remarkable experiment was about to take place. Captain Reyes stood with Elder Vexa and representatives from the Elshuri, watching as Ithax positioned himself in the center of the room. Are you sure about this? Reyes asked, her concern evident in both her voice and the subtle patterns her neural implant projected. The simulations are promising, Ithax responded, his crystalline form refracting light in what Kira recognized as anticipation. The human connection has revealed possibilities we never imagined. Dr. Patel monitored the equipment. Neural synchronization at 93%. Ready when you are. Ithax's crystalline body began to resonate at a specific frequency. Simultaneously, 5 humans with neural implants focused their thoughts on a shared image, a protective dome. As their synchronized thoughts merged with Ithax's resonance, something extraordinary happened. Crystal structures began to grow from Ithax's form, extending outward in perfect mathematical patterns, creating a translucent dome that enclosed the entire group. The structure hadn't been physically constructed. It had been thought into existence through the human-Vexari neural link. Remarkable, breathed Elder Vexa. Crystalline formation through directed consciousness. The implications are enormous, said the Elshiri representative. Such technology could revolutionize how we approach construction throughout the galaxy. The demonstration continued successfully until alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Solar prominence detected, announced the automated system. Radiation surge imminent. The moon's position relative to Tau Ceti made it vulnerable to solar flares, a known risk they had prepared for. But the monitoring system showed this flare was far larger than anything they had encountered before. Evacuation protocols initiated. Commander Zhang ordered all personnel to radiation shelters. But Ithax remained in position, the crystal dome still growing around him. No time, he said, his patterns conveying urgent determination. The construction teams on the surface. Through her neural link, Kira understood immediately. Hundreds of Vexari were working on exterior projects, too far from shelters to reach safety before the radiation hit. Without discussion, she and the other linked humans moved to join Ithax, forming a circle around him. Through their shared consciousness, they began projecting a new image, not just a dome, but a planetary shield. What are they doing? Elder Vexa asked as the humans fell into a trance-like state. Something impossible, Rise answered, watching in awe. Across the moon's surface, crystal structures began to grow at an unprecedented rate, linking together in a complex lattice that extended into the upper atmosphere. As the solar flare struck, the crystal network refracted the deadly radiation, splitting it into a spectacular aurora that danced harmlessly above the surface. The moment, captured by monitoring satellites, was transmitted across Concord space. Billions of beings from thousands of worlds watched as human consciousness and Vexari crystal technology merged to create something neither species could have achieved alone. In the central chamber, the humans slowly regained normal awareness, exhausted but triumphant. How did you know that would work? Rise asked Kira. The lieutenant smiled wearily. We didn't, but Ithax had a theory, and we had faith. Turns out that's a powerful combination. 1 year to the day after the UNSC Mercy had first arrived in Vexari space, the crystalline moon called Mercy gleamed in the light of Tau Ceti. What had once been a barren silicate sphere now shimmered with life, a world of crystal spires and resonant valleys, of light paths and harmonic cities. The last community of Vexari was completing its transfer from their dying homeworld, a solemn yet hopeful procession witnessed by representatives from across the galaxy. The Concord, initially resistant, had ultimately been unable to ignore the groundswell of public sentiment. When billions of citizens across 17 worlds had seen the footage of humans risking their lives to save the crystalline beings, opinion had shifted dramatically. Admiral Elena Reyes, recently promoted for her exceptional diplomatic achievement, stood on the ceremonial platform alongside Elder Vexa. Both had changed over the past year. Rise now bore neural crystal implants that shimmered beneath her skin, allowing her to perceive the crystalline resonances that formed Vexari communication. Vexa's crystalline form had developed new facets specifically designed to process and express emotional nuances, a biological adaptation previously unknown among her kind. Did you ever imagine this outcome when you first heard our call? Vexa asked, her light patterns conveying a complex mixture of gratitude and wonder. Ray smiled. Not in my wildest dreams. I just knew we had to try. Around them, humans and Vexari worked seamlessly together, their neural connections allowing instantaneous communication and coordination. What had begun as a desperate rescue had evolved into something unprecedented, the first truly integrated mixed-species communities in galactic history. The crowd fell silent as Ithax approached the central platform. Once a junior resonator, he had emerged as a visionary leader through the crisis. Behind him, a massive crystal structure stood covered in shimmering veils. Today marks not just the completion of our exodus, Ithax began, his patterns translated for all present, but the birth of a new understanding. We gather to unveil the monument of answered cries. At his signal, the veils dissolved, not pulled away but transformed into light itself. The monument stood revealed, a colossal crystal formation grown from elements of both worlds. Human and Vexari hands reached toward each other across a void, not quite touching, but connected by a bridge of light. This monument contains crystalline resonance patterns from our original homeworld, Ithax explained, and neural pattern recordings from the humans who first answered our call. When activated, it will share our story across space itself. Elder Vexa and Admiral Rice stepped forward together, placing their hands, one crystalline, one human, on the activation matrix. The monument began to glow from within, points of light swirling through its crystalline structure like stars being born. Then it happened. The monument released not just light, but a telepathic resonance that expanded outward at the speed of thought. Every being present, regardless of species, felt the same sequence of emotions: the terror of impending extinction, the despair of abandonment, and then the shocking, unexpected joy of salvation. The Galactic Concord representatives, many initially present only as a diplomatic formality, found themselves unexpectedly moved. The Zith ambassador, whose species prided themselves on pure logical calculation, experienced emotion for the first time in their evolutionary history. The ethereal Morvani, who had dismissed the Vexari as an evolutionary dead end, felt the weight of that callous judgment. In the days that followed, something unprecedented occurred across Concord space. Citizens from all 17 member species began demanding policy changes. The movement, initially dismissed as temporary emotional reaction, only grew stronger. 3 months later, the Concord Assembly voted to establish the Mercy Protocol, requiring response to all sentient distress signals regardless of evolutionary status or resource implications. On the newly thriving crystal world, Admiral Rice stood with Ithax, watching the sun set through the crystalline atmosphere, painting the sky in colors no human had witnessed before this collaboration. "We've created something beautiful here," she said, "something that will outlast all of us." Ithax's form resonated with agreement. "From the beginning of time, the universe has been full of cries for mercy," he said. "The difference now is that they will be answered." As if in response, a distant distress call reached their monitoring systems, a fledgling aquatic civilization facing environmental collapse in a system 50 light-years distant. Without hesitation, humans and Vexari began preparations to respond together. The cycle of mercy had begun.